The void hummed with the silent pulse of ancient stars, a vast expanse where time stretched thin. Out of this emptiness, a rift opened with a crackling burst of energy. From the fold in space emerged the starship Exile, the spearhead of humanity's return fleet, its hull shimmering with the accumulated frost of millennia. Behind it followed a procession of enormous warships, each one bristling with sleek, deadly weaponry, a floating armory in the dark. This was not a peaceful expedition. This was vengeance 5,000 years in the making. On the bridge of the Exile, Commander Saria Voss stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the distant swirl of a galactic arm. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life, trained for it, carried it in her bones. Her ancestors had whispered about Earth's destruction across generations, passing down not just stories, but the rage and sorrow that came with them. They had been born in exile, on ships that drifted to the edges of known space to avoid annihilation. But no more running. The time had come to confront those responsible for the loss of humanity's home world. "Status report," Saria said, her voice low and calm, though every muscle in her body felt wound tight. Lieutenant Yara answered from her station, her hands dancing across the interface. "All systems nominal. The fleet is synchronized. We've cleared the temporal fold. Any signs of resistance?" Saria asked. "None so far, Commander. The region is quiet. Too quiet." Saria inhaled slowly. She knew the eerie silence wasn't a good sign. After 5,000 years, she doubted the coalition who destroyed Earth would have forgotten about the threat humanity once posed. Yet here they were, unchallenged, flying deeper into the galaxy that had once cast them out. The bridge was filled with a quiet tension, as though every officer shared the same unspoken thought. The ghosts of Earth were with them, watching, waiting. In the heart of the bridge, encased in a glass frame, rested a faded photograph, a relic from a time when humanity still had a home. The photo showed a glimpse of the old world, green fields, blue oceans, a sunlit sky. Saria stared at it for a moment, feeling the weight of that loss press on her chest like a stone. They had left Earth behind, but they had never really let it go. Yara glanced over her shoulder. "We're receiving the signal again, Commander. Same coordinates." Saria nodded. The signal was what had brought them here, the ghostly transmission emanating from a region thought to be abandoned for centuries. It carried the signature of the old coalition, the same alliance that had once united to destroy Earth. No one knew how or why the signal had resurfaced now, but it was a beacon, an invitation, or a warning. Either way, it was the first solid lead in centuries. "Bring us within scanning range," Saria ordered. "I want to know what's waiting for us." The engines thrummed beneath the deck, and the ship glided forward, flanked by the other warships. The blackness of space seemed to deepen as they approached the coordinates, as if the stars themselves were retreating. On the bridge, the tension mounted with every passing second. Saria felt the weight of countless generations on her shoulders. This wasn't just another mission. It was the culmination of 5,000 years of survival and anger. Failure was not an option. The ship's AI chimed in. A soft, dispassionate voice. "Proximity alert. Unidentified objects approaching from the perimeter. Contacts." Saria's voice sharpened. Yara worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. "Small vessels. They're fast. Estimated interception in 2 minutes." Saria's jaw tightened. The ghosts of Earth's destruction had come to greet them, after all. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations," Saria commanded. Alarms echoed throughout the ship, and the hum of energy shields activating resonated beneath their feet. The view screen flickered, revealing the approaching vessels. Dozens of small, sleek ships moving in tight formations. They didn't look like the grand warships of the coalition that humanity remembered. These ships were scarred, patched together with different technologies, as if they had been scavenging across the galaxy. But there was no mistaking the intent behind their movements. These were predators, hunting in a pack. "Scavengers," Yara muttered, her lip curling in disdain. "They're not the coalition, just parasites feeding off the ruins." Saria clenched her fists. She had hoped for a confrontation with the coalition, not a skirmish with scavengers. But a fight was a fight, and she wasn't about to let these raiders interfere with the mission. "Engage the fleet," she ordered. Let's show them what 5,000 years of preparation looks like. The exile surged forward, flanked by its escorts. Beams of energy lanced from the human ships, cutting through the void with deadly precision. The scavenger vessels darted like gnats, fast and nimble, but they were no match for the sheer firepower of humanity's warships. Explosions bloomed in the dark, brief flashes of light that were quickly swallowed by the void. Saria watched the battle unfold on the tactical display, her expression unreadable. It was over quickly, too quickly. The scavengers had been no more than a nuisance, and their ships were now nothing but debris drifting through space. But the encounter left a sour taste in her mouth. This wasn't the confrontation she had been preparing for her entire life. All enemy vessels neutralized, Yara reported, though there was no triumph in her voice. Saria exhaled slowly, her mind already racing ahead. If these scavengers were here, it meant that the region wasn't as abandoned as they had thought. And if scavengers had found something worth guarding, then maybe, just maybe, they were on the right track. Scan the wreckage, Saria ordered. I want to know if they were carrying anything of value. The crew moved efficiently, scanning the debris field. After a few tense moments, Yara's console beeped. Commander, I found something, she said, her tone laced with intrigue. One of the scavenger ships was carrying an archive. Saria's brow furrowed. An archive? Of what? I'm not sure yet. It's encrypted, but it looks old. Very old. Could be Coalition data. A flicker of hope ignited in Saria's chest. If the archive contained information about the Coalition, it could be the key to finding the ones responsible for Earth's destruction. But hope was a dangerous thing. It could cloud judgment, lead to mistakes. Bring it aboard, Saria ordered, and get me a team to crack it open. The bridge fell into a tense silence as the crew worked to retrieve the archive. Saria stood by the view screen, her gaze drifting to the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Coalition was waiting, if they still existed at all. The scavengers were just the beginning, a prelude to the real fight, and Saria intended to see it through, no matter the cost. She glanced at the photo of Earth one last time, the faded image a reminder of everything they had lost. This mission wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure the ghosts of the past finally found peace. Commander, Yara said, breaking the silence, we've got the archive. It's transmitting something. Another set of coordinates. Saria's heart skipped a beat. Where? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yara looked up, her expression grave. It's leading us deeper into Coalition space. Saria smiled grimly. Good, she said. That's exactly where we need to be. The ship's engines rumbled, and the exile turned toward the new coordinates. The hunt had begun. The exile drifted silently through the debris field, her sleek hull cutting through the remnants of scavenger vessels that had been reduced to scrap. Commander Saria Voss watched the flickering tactical display, her jaw set. Something gnawed at her, a sense that the skirmish had been too easy, too convenient. The scavengers weren't the threat she'd spent her entire life preparing to fight. They were like rats, scurrying through the ruins of greater civilizations. But even rats guarded nests. Archive is aboard and secured, Lieutenant Yara reported, the glow from her console reflecting off her sharp features. Preliminary scans show encrypted Coalition data, fragmented but intact. Saria nodded, though she didn't take her eyes off the void beyond the view screen. Get the decryption team on it. I want results yesterday. The exile's engines thrummed softly as the fleet repositioned, the warships forming a protective perimeter around the flagship. For all their firepower, the silence of space still pressed down on them like a heavy weight. The scavenger ships might be gone, but they were no closer to finding what they'd come for, the remnants of the Coalition, the architects of Earth's destruction. Saria knew that somewhere out there lay the answers, tangled in the ruins of empires long forgotten. She just had to find them before her crew's patience frayed, and before the ghosts of the past consumed them whole. Commander, Yara called, her voice tight with something new. We're picking up residual energy signatures. Looks like those scavenger ships came from somewhere close. Saria turned sharply, her pulse quickening. You have a source? Possibly, Yara said, fingers flying over the console. There's a derelict structure a few light minutes from here. Scans show minimal power, barely a flicker, but it matches Coalition architecture. architecture. Saraya narrowed her eyes, set a course. As the engines roared to life and the fleet aligned with the new coordinates, Saria felt the familiar churn of tension building in her chest. They were venturing deeper into hostile territory, following the faintest breadcrumb of a trail. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had in centuries. "Commander," Captain Drex's voice cut through the comms, rough and impatient. "We really chasing Rex now? Feels like a wild goose hunt to me." Saria allowed herself the briefest smirk. "You want a coalition stronghold dropped in our laps, Captain? This is how we find it, one piece at a time." Drex snorted, but didn't press the issue. Saria knew he shared her hunger for confrontation, though for him it was a simpler equation. Find the enemy, crush them, and avenge the fallen. For Saria, it was more complicated. Vengeance had its place, but it wouldn't fill the void Earth's loss had left behind. She needed something more, answers, closure, maybe even redemption, but she didn't say that aloud. Some things didn't survive being spoken. The derelict structure loomed ahead of them, a twisted mass of alien metal and stone orbiting a dead moon. Its surface was cracked and pitted, scarred by centuries of neglect. It looked more like a tomb than a base, but the faint energy readings didn't lie. Something inside was still alive, or at least not quite dead. "Bring us in slow," Saria ordered. "I don't want any surprises." The fleet moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. As the exile drifted closer, drones deployed from her hull, scanning the structure's surface. They reported nothing. No active defenses, no life signs, just the faint hum of ancient machinery struggling to keep itself running. "Landing team, gear up," Saria said. "We're going in." A squad of armored Marines assembled in the hangar, their suits gleaming under the harsh lights. Saria joined them, strapping on her own armor with practiced efficiency. She preferred to lead from the front, where the action was, where the risks were highest. It was the only way she knew how to fight, head on, with no retreat. Captain Drex appeared at her side, his armor already scuffed from years of hard use. "I assume you've got a bad feeling about this," he said, his grin sharp and humorless. Saria gave him a sideways glance. "I always do." The boarding shuttle descended through the wreckage, its engines whispering against the cold vacuum of space. The Marines remained silent, their visors glowing faintly in the dim light. Saria's heart beat steadily, the rhythm familiar and grounding. Whatever waited for them inside that structure, answers, enemies, or ghosts, they were ready for it. The shuttle docked with the derelict station, the airlock hissing as it pressurized. The Marines moved in quickly, weapons raised, sweeping the dark corridors with precision. The station's interior was a maze of twisted metal and broken walls, the remnants of long-forgotten battles etched into every surface. "Clear so far," one of the Marines reported over the comms, his voice low and tense. Saria moved deeper into the station, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. The faint hum of machinery grew louder as they advanced, guiding them toward the heart of the structure. And then they found it, a chamber bathed in flickering light, filled with rows of alien consoles and holographic displays, all running on the last dregs of power. "Looks like we found their archive," Drex muttered, glancing around the room. Saria approached one of the consoles, her gloved hand hovering over the interface. The alien technology was ancient, but some symbols were familiar, echoes of languages the Coalition had used to communicate during their reign. "Get the data flowing," she ordered. "I want to know what they were hiding here." The Marines fanned out, securing the area while the tech team worked to interface with the alien systems. The holographic displays flickered to light, revealing fragments of information, battle plans, troop movements, supply routes, and something else. Saria leaned closer, her heart skipping a beat. The data included references to Earth, coordinates, tactical reports, encrypted transmissions, but something was off. The timeline didn't match the records she knew. According to these files, Earth hadn't been destroyed in a single cataclysmic strike, as humanity had always believed. It had been a containment effort. Her blood ran cold as she scanned the fragmented reports. The Coalition hadn't just destroyed Earth, they had quarantined it, sealing it off from the rest of the galaxy. But why? Before she could process the implications, Yara's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander, we've got company. Multiple ships inbound. Fast." Saria cursed under her breath. Drex Get your people back to the shuttle, now." The Marines moved swiftly, their boots clanging against the metal floor as they retraced their steps. Alarms blared through the station, as if the ancient machinery sensed the incoming threat. "Fleet, prepare for intercept," Saria ordered over the comms. "We're not leaving without that data." The archive flickered one last time, and Saria made a snap decision. "Yara, download everything you can, even if it's incomplete." "Copy that," Yara replied. "Data transfer in progress." Saria's pulse raced as the walls of the station trembled, distant explosions reverberating through the corridors. The enemy was closing in. Whoever they were, they didn't want this information falling into human hands. "Drex!" she barked. "Get us out of here." The Marines piled into the shuttle, and Saria was the last to board, slamming the hatch shut behind her. The engines roared to life, and the shuttle shot away from the derelict station, racing toward the safety of the fleet. But as the station disappeared into the darkness, Saria knew they were far from safe. They had found the ghosts of the past, and those ghosts were angry. The real fight was just beginning. The shuttle jolted as it locked onto the exiles' docking bay, metallic clangs echoing through the hull. Saria ripped off her helmet as she stormed toward the bridge, tension buzzing through her veins. Every instinct told her that they had just triggered something ancient and dangerous. Whoever sent those incoming ships wasn't going to let the fleet leave quietly. They were walking straight into a trap, or worse, the heart of a war they didn't understand. As the doors to the bridge hissed open, Yara greeted her with a grim nod. "We've got multiple hostiles closing fast. 30 vessels. Some small raiders, others larger. They don't match scavenger profiles." "Coalition?" Saria asked, though she already knew the answer. These weren't just scavengers scavenging. This was organized. Yara hesitated. "Could be, but the ships are old, very old, and some show signs of repurposed human tech." Saria's stomach twisted. She leaned over the tactical display, watching the enemy ships swarm toward their position like vultures circling a carcass. Among the unfamiliar vessels were hulking frigates pieced together from ancient human designs, now warped and twisted by centuries of alien hands. "How the hell do they have human tech?" Captain Drex's voice crackled over the comms, disbelief turning his usual gruff tone sharp. "We lost Earth. They shouldn't have anything from us." Saria clenched her jaw. "They didn't just destroy Earth, Drex. They took it, and they've been feeding on it ever since." Drex cursed under his breath. "We're blowing them all to hell, right?" "Not yet," Saria snapped. "We need information more than a graveyard." She turned to Yara. "How long until we can access that archive data?" "It's fragmenting as we decrypt it," Yara replied, frustration evident. "Some sections are corrupted. Looks deliberate, like someone didn't want this knowledge getting out." Before Saria could respond, the exile's AI interrupted, its voice cold and clinical. "Incoming hail from the enemy fleet. Audio only." Saria exchanged a glance with Drex over the comms. "They want to talk?" he asked, his disbelief evident. "Patch it through," Saria ordered. "Let's see what they have to say." A harsh, static-filled voice filled the bridge. "Humans, your return was expected, but not welcome. Turn back or you will join your world in ruin." The voice was alien, yet the bitterness in it was unmistakable. Saria's fists clenched at the mention of Earth, their world, spoken of like it was a corpse left behind in the dirt. "You're mistaken," Saria said, her voice calm but laced with steel. "We didn't come back just to die. We came to finish what you started." The alien voice hummed with dark amusement. "Finish? You misunderstand. There is nothing left to finish. Earth's fall was not our triumph. It was a warning." Saria's pulse quickened. "A warning against what?" The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only a hiss of dead air in its wake. "Well, that was ominous," Drex muttered. Saria stared at the blank comms channel, a knot tightening in her gut. Something about the way the alien spoke. It wasn't gloating. It was almost regretful. "Commander," Yara interrupted, "the archive just decrypted another layer. It's not what we expected." Saria stepped closer to Yara's console, her heart pounding in her chest. "What did you find?" Yara hesitated before speaking, as if the words themselves carried weight. "According to these records, Earth wasn't destroyed by a coalition attack. It was quarantined because of something humanity did." The air seemed to thicken, pressing down on the entire bridge. Saria's mind raced. The coalition didn't destroy Earth. They had tried to contain it. But why? "Get me specifics," Saria demanded, her voice sharp. What exactly did we do? The records are fragmented, but it mentions a weapon, Yara said slowly. Something humanity developed, something that scared the Coalition so badly they sealed off Earth and banished us to the edge of space. A weapon? Drex scoffed over the comms. Why didn't we know about this before? Because it was buried, Saria murmured, her mind racing. And if the Coalition was this terrified of it, that means it's still out there, somewhere. Commander, we've got bigger problems. Yara cut in. The enemy ships are closing fast. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they're on us. Saria gritted her teeth. They were running out of time, and the answers they needed were still buried in broken data. But one thing was clear. Their mission was no longer just about vengeance. They were chasing a truth that could change everything, or destroy them all. Prepare the fleet for evasive maneuvers, Saria ordered. We're not going down today. Commander, Yara added, her voice hesitant. There's one more thing. The archive included coordinates. It's a location on Earth. Saria's breath caught. Earth. After 5,000 years, the ghosts of their lost home were calling them back. But if the weapon that terrified the Coalition still existed, it meant that whatever waited for them on Earth was far more dangerous than anything they had imagined. Set a course, Saria ordered. We're going home. Drex's voice crackled over the comms. Are you sure that's a good idea, Commander? No, Saria admitted, her expression grim. But it's the only one we've got. The fleet adjusted its trajectory, engines roaring to life as they veered away from the incoming enemy vessel. The alien ships pursued, their dark hulls glinting in the starlight, but the human warships were faster, more determined. They had a destination now, a final piece of the puzzle, waiting on the shattered remains of Earth. As the exile surged forward, Saria allowed herself a moment to think. What if the Coalition had been right? What if humanity's past held a danger too great to unleash? But then she thought of the generations that had lived and died in exile, carrying the weight of Earth's loss like a curse. They deserved the truth, whatever it was. Commander, Yara called, pulling her from her thoughts. Incoming message from the enemy fleet. It's on a secure channel. Saria raised an eyebrow. Put it through. A familiar voice echoed over the comms, gravelly, bitter, and unmistakably alien. You should not have come back, Commander Voss. The past does not forgive. Saria's jaw tightened. Neither do we. The transmission ended, and the alien ships accelerated, determined to cut them off before they reached Earth. All hands! Prepare for combat, Saria shouted. We're going through them. The fleet roared forward, guns blazing, as humanity's warships engaged the enemy in a furious clash. The void lit up with explosions and energy bursts, the darkness torn apart by the fury of a battle 5,000 years in the making. Saria gripped the edge of her console, her heart racing. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a race against time. Somewhere in the wreckage of Earth lay the truth they had sought for centuries, and if they didn't reach it first, the ghosts of the past would consume them all. Hold the line, Saria barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. No one turns back. The enemy fleet swarmed around them, but the humans fought with a desperation born of centuries of exile. They had come too far to fail now. Saria's eyes burned with determination as she stared into the storm of fire and steel. They were going home, and nothing would stop them. The exile barreled toward Earth's shattered coordinates, the human fleet locked in a relentless battle against the alien pursuers. Energy beams slashed through the darkness, while ships maneuvered in intricate patterns, dodging fire and returning it with merciless precision. Explosions lit the void, fragments of vessels scattering into the nothingness between stars. Saria Voss stood firm on the bridge, her mind a storm of calculations, regret, and purpose. Shields at 40%, Yara shouted over the chaotic symphony of alarms and weapon discharges. Saria clenched her jaw. The enemy fleet was stronger than expected, but they were fighting not just with rage, but with experience, and that gave humanity an edge. After 5,000 years, they had mastered patience and precision, but it wasn't enough. Not here. Not now. Captain Drex, what's your status? Saria called into the comms, her voice cutting through the noise. We're holding, Commander, Drex grunted, but I'll be damned if these bastards aren't putting up a fight. You don't sound surprised, Saria said, a grim smile tugging at her lips. I'm not. Drex replied. This was never going to be easy. It was a small comfort to know she wasn't the only one who had anticipated this struggle. But they were running out of time. The enemy ships were closing in, their formation tightening like a noose. If they didn't break through soon, the fleet would be overwhelmed. Commander, the archive data is fully decrypted, Yara announced. There's something else, something buried deep in the code. Saria turned sharply. What is it? Yara hesitated, then spoke carefully, as if the words themselves carried weight. It's a failsafe, a directive tied to the quarantine of Earth. If we reach the surface, it triggers. Saria's heart pounded. What kind of trigger? Yara's face was pale. It reactivates whatever weapon humanity left behind. For a moment, the weight of the revelation left the bridge in stunned silence. This was the Coalition's greatest fear. The weapon wasn't gone. It had been waiting all this time, buried beneath the ashes of Earth, dormant, but not destroyed. And now, if they reached the planet, it would awaken. Commander, Drex's voice cut in through the comms, low and serious. I say we let it wake up. Whatever it is, we need every advantage we can get. Saria knew what he meant. The Coalition had quarantined Earth out of fear, locking away humanity's weapon to protect themselves. But if that weapon could be reclaimed, they might stand a chance against any force the galaxy threw at them. It was a dangerous gamble, but after millennia in exile, humanity had nothing left to lose, except itself. We don't even know what it is, Saria said, her voice measured but tense. It could destroy us just as easily as them. Drex scoffed. You think we came all this way to hesitate now? If it scared the Coalition this much, maybe it's exactly what we need. Saria glanced around the bridge. The faces of her crew reflected the same mix of fear, hope, and desperation that churned within her. The promise of vengeance, of power, of finally seizing control of their fate. It was intoxicating, but it was also dangerous. Drex, this isn't just about winning, Saria said quietly. If we do this, we're not just waking up a weapon, we're waking up the past, and becoming the very thing they feared. And maybe that's what we need to survive. Drex replied coldly. Saria felt the weight of his words settle on her. He wasn't entirely wrong. After 5,000 years of being hunted, hated, and forgotten, the allure of unleashing humanity's ancient power was overwhelming. But was it worth sacrificing what they had become? Was it worth losing themselves in the pursuit of revenge? Commander, Yara interrupted urgently. We're losing ships. If we don't make a decision soon, we won't have the strength to make it to Earth. Saria closed her eyes, forcing her mind to focus. The ancient weapon was their ace in the hole, the Coalition's greatest fear and humanity's last hope. But activating it meant opening Pandora's box, with no guarantee they could control what came out. She knew Drex would pull the trigger without hesitation, but she wasn't Drex. She wasn't just a soldier anymore, she was a leader, and this decision would define not only the battle, but the future of humanity itself. Saria exhaled slowly. We're not waking the weapon. There was a stunned silence over the comms. What? Drex's voice was sharp with disbelief. You can't be serious, Commander. I am, Saria said firmly. We didn't survive 5,000 years to become the monsters they feared. We're not winning a war just to lose ourselves. You're making a mistake, Drex snarled. You'll doom us all. Maybe, Saria replied quietly, but at least we'll know who we are. Drex's silence was louder than any explosion. Saria could feel his anger radiating through the comms, a cold fury born from centuries of frustration and grief. She knew what this decision meant. It wasn't just a tactical disagreement, it was a fracture in the fleet, a break between those who still believed in redemption and those who had given up on it. Then you're on your own, Drex said, his voice a low growl. We'll find our own way. Saria didn't try to stop him. She knew better. Drex's war wasn't against the Coalition. It was against the ghosts of the past, and nothing she said would change that. The comms went dead as Drex's ships peeled away from the fleet, engines burning bright as they set a new course, away from Earth, away from her. Let them go, Saria said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Yara's gaze was filled with uncertainty, but she didn't question the order. What now, Commander? Saria stared out at the stars, the distant shape of Earth just barely visible on the view screen. A shattered planet, scarred but not forgotten. Now, Saria said quietly, we finish what we started. The fleet pressed on, battered but unbroken. They had lost allies, lost ships, and perhaps lost their chance at ultimate victory. But they still had hope, and as long as they had that, the fight wasn't over. The enemy fleet closed in again, relentless and determined. But this time, Saria felt a strange calm settle over her. They might not wake the ancient weapon. They might not crush the coalition beneath their heel, but they would face whatever came next with their heads high, their hearts unbroken. "Hold the line," Saria whispered, her voice steady and sure. For Earth, the fleet roared forward, engines blazing as the battle reached its fever pitch. Ships clashed in a storm of fire and steel. But Saria knew that the real war was already won, because in choosing not to wake the weapon, they had chosen something more powerful than vengeance. They had chosen themselves. The enemy ships trailed in the fleet's wake as the shattered remains of Earth loomed ahead, a ghost of a planet suspended in the void. Cracked continents and scarred oceans stretched beneath a web of debris left from ancient battle. Yet, despite the ruin, there was something quietly defiant about it. An old, battered world that had refused to disappear entirely. The sight of it hit Saria Voss like a punch to the chest. She had grown up hearing stories about this place, the cradle of their species. Now that she was here, standing on the bridge of the exile, the reality of it was overwhelming. This was the world they had lost, but was it still theirs to reclaim? "Commander," Yara called, breaking the spell. "We're approaching the coordinates from the archive. Surface scans show minimal life signatures, mostly flora and microorganisms." "What about the weapon?" Saria asked, her voice low. Yara shook her head. "No sign of active systems, but there's a structure at the site. It could be where the weapon was buried." Saria nodded, her expression unreadable. "Prepare a landing party." The order was met with tense silence. Even with Drex and his ships gone, the weight of the decision still lingered. They were heading into the unknown, down to a planet haunted by ancient mistakes, chasing a legacy that had almost destroyed them. The shuttle touched down on the cracked surface of Earth with a jolt, its engines kicking up a cloud of dust. Saria stepped out first, her boots crunching on the brittle ground. The landscape was eerily quiet, as if the planet itself held its breath. What little vegetation remained grew in tangled patches, pale and stubborn beneath the thin atmosphere. They made their way toward the structure, a low building half buried in the ground, worn smooth by centuries of wind and decay. Its walls were covered in inscriptions, alien symbols mixed with human ones, a fusion of languages that hinted at cooperation long forgotten. Yara scanned the doorway. "It's sealed, but the power core is still active. We can override it." "Do it," Saria ordered, her heart pounding. The door groaned as it slid open, revealing a dark interior bathed in faint green light. They entered cautiously, weapons drawn. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old metal and something colder, something ancient. At the center of the room stood a terminal, its screen flickering weakly. Saria approached it slowly, her fingers brushing against the dusty surface. This was it, the heart of the weapon, the reason the Coalition had feared them. "Can you access it?" Saria asked Yara. Yara knelt beside the terminal, her fingers dancing over the interface. "I think so. The systems are degraded, but wait." Her eyes widened. "Commander, you're not going to believe this. What is it?" Yara stared at the screen, disbelief etched on her face. "It's not a weapon. It's a message." Saria's heart skipped a beat. "A message? From who?" "From us," Yara whispered. "It's a signal we sent 5,000 years ago." The room fell silent as the weight of the revelation settled over them. Saria leaned closer, reading the ancient transmission displayed on the terminal. It was a warning, sent from Earth before the quarantine. "We've created something we cannot control. Do not follow us. Seal this world and do not return." Saria's breath caught in her throat. The Coalition hadn't acted out of malice. They had responded to humanity's own fear. Earth's destruction had been a desperate attempt to stop a catastrophe of their own making. And now, after all these centuries, they had returned, chasing a shadow that no longer existed. The enormity of it hit Saria like a wave. Their mission, their vengeance, their entire history. It had all been based on a misunderstanding, a wound that had festered across millennia. And now, standing in the ruins of their lost home, they had a choice. "Commander," Yara said softly, "what do we do now?" Saria closed her eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They could still choose vengeance. They could take this knowledge, twist it into a weapon, and use it to burn their enemies to the ground. Or they could choose something else, something harder. "We let it end here," Saria whispered, opening her eyes. No more ghosts, no more war. The decision felt like a knife twisting in her gut, but it was the only way forward. They couldn't change the past, but they could shape the future if they had the courage to let go of the anger that had defined them for so long. Yara gave a small, solemn nod. I'll deactivate the systems. We can leave this place as it is. Soraya watched as Yara shut down the terminal, the flickering green light fading into darkness. The ancient message. The weapon that never was, the fear that had driven them all. It was over. They left the structure in silence, stepping out into the thin light of the ruined world. The shuttle engines hummed softly as they ascended, carrying them back to the waiting fleet. As they rose through the atmosphere, Soraya cast one last look at the broken planet below, a place that had once been home, now little more than a memory. Back aboard the Exile, the crew gathered on the bridge, waiting for Saria's next move. The tension was palpable, the weight of the decision pressing down on all of them. Saria took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady. We're not here to restart old wars. We're here to build something new. The words felt strange in her mouth, but they also felt right. For the first time in centuries, they were free, not just from exile, but from the chains of their own past. We'll dismantle the warships, Saria continued, turn them into vessels of exploration and rebuilding. The galaxy doesn't need another empire. It needs hope. There were murmurs of uncertainty among the crew, but no one voiced dissent. They had come too far, seen too much, to cling to old grudges. Yara stepped forward, a small smile on her face. What do we call this new beginning? Saria thought for a moment, then smiled. The long dawn. The name carried a sense of renewal, of light, breaking through the darkness after a long, cold night. It wasn't just a mission anymore, it was a promise. As the fleet shifted course, engines humming with a new purpose, Saria allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. They had not found vengeance on Earth, but they had found something far more valuable, the chance to start again. She walked to the edge of the bridge where the old photograph of Earth rested in its frame, a memento of a world lost and found again, not in soil or stone, but in spirit. Saria placed the photograph into a small capsule, sealing it with a final message. We were here, we lived, and now we move forward. With a quiet hum, the capsule launched into space, drifting toward the distant stars. As the fleet accelerated into the unknown, leaving the ruins of Earth behind, Saria felt something lift from her heart. A burden she had carried her entire life finally released. They were no longer ghosts. They were something new, and their story was just beginning.